Kai had never expected that a simple research assignment could change his life so completely. As a xenobiologist, he had spent most of his career observing alien species from a safe distance, analyzing their biology, and writing detailed reports that no one outside the scientific community read. But Zyphora Prime was different. It was not only the capital of a distant galaxy, but also the seat of the Zalari Empire, a civilization known across star systems for its strict hierarchy, immense wealth, and cold diplomacy. Humans were rare visitors here, and Kai knew that any misstep could cost him his life. Yet he had never felt fear like this before. The palace of the Zalari Queen was more breathtaking than he had imagined. Towering crystal walls stretched high into the sky, reflecting the pale purple light of the twin suns. The corridors seemed endless, lined with statues of Zalari ancestors carved from shimmering stones that seemed alive. Soft whispers followed him everywhere he went, as courtiers and guards stole glances at the human walking among them. He could feel their judgment in the air. Humans were unpredictable, emotional, and, to the Zalari, fragile. Kai had heard rumors of how outsiders were tested, sometimes mercilessly, before being allowed within palace walls. He tried to keep his composure. He reminded himself that he was not a diplomat or a soldier. He was a scientist. His job was simple: observe, record, and maintain peaceful contact. Yet as he walked, escorted by a silent Exilari aide, the feeling of eyes on him never wavered. Every turn of the hallway made him more aware of the vast difference between human and Zalari cultures. The humans he had met in the galaxy had always been adaptable, relying on emotion and instinct as much as intelligence, but the Zalari were creatures of order. Every step, every gesture seemed planned and deliberate. He felt clumsy, alien, and painfully exposed, and then it happened. The heavy palace doors at the end of the hall suddenly slammed open, startling everyone. Guards stiffened, hands reaching for weapons, and courtiers froze mid-step. From the bright light outside, a figure ran into the corridor, a young Zalari female, no older than 15 in human terms. She was swift, her movements almost liquid, her expression uncontainably joyful. Before anyone could react, she threw herself at Kai and hugged him tightly. The force of her embrace was surprising, not only for its warmth, but for the sincerity that radiated from her. She whispered something in Jalari, her melodic voice carrying excitement and relief. Kai, frozen in shock, could only blink. He had not expected this. He had not known her. He did not understand why she would behave this way. The palace went silent. Not a single sound disturbed the sudden stillness. Courtiers, guards, and even the queen, who had been observing from a balcony above, stopped in their tracks. Eyes widened, mouths slightly open. It was as if time itself had paused. Kai could feel their judgment and confusion pressing down on him, yet he also felt the little girl's hands gripping his shoulders, holding him firmly, but gently. Finally he found his voice. I don't understand, he said. I'm Kai. We haven't met before. The girl's face lit up even more, and she repeated her words in Jalari. Kai could not translate it, but the tone was unmistakably affectionate. She looked as if she had found someone she had been searching for her entire life. The courtiers whispered among themselves, but their voices sounded small and fearful in the vast hall. Even the queen's expression, usually unreadable and cold, softened for a fraction of a second. Kai felt a mix of confusion and curiosity. "Why me?" he asked, finally daring to speak aloud. "Why are you hugging me?" The girl tilted her head, studying him carefully. Her large, luminous eyes seemed to look through him, assessing every detail. She smiled shyly. Then she released him, stepping back but keeping her gaze on him, as if he were the most important being in the universe. The courtiers murmured again, and the queen herself descended the stairs slowly, her regal presence commanding silence with every step. "Explain yourself," the queen said, her voice deep and steady. "Who is this human, Lyra?" Why do you embrace him as if you have known him your entire life? Kai looked at her, feeling suddenly very small. He wanted to explain, but every word sounded inadequate. I am a xenobiologist, he said slowly. I study species, observe, and record. I don't understand why she is... Enough! The Queen interrupted, her tone leaving no room for argument. She approached him, her presence both imposing and curious. Humans are rare. Their minds, their ways, their emotions are unpredictable, and yet you have reached her in ways even we cannot. Speak the truth, human. Why do you exist here? Kai swallowed hard. He realized then that his scientific knowledge alone would not be enough. The Solari were evaluating not just his intelligence, but his character, his courage, and his ability to adapt. I am here to observe, to learn, and to make contact, he said. I mean no harm to anyone. I am curious about your species, your culture, and your science. That is all. Lyra watched him intently, then ran forward again and held his hand lightly, as if affirming his words. Her trust was undeniable, and it was clear that she did not see him as a stranger. The Queen studied this interaction, her sharp eyes narrowing. She had never seen a human reach a Zalari child in this way. Zalari children were taught discipline and control from birth. They rarely displayed such emotional openness, and they certainly never formed bonds with outsiders. "What trick is this?" she demanded quietly, more to herself than to Kai. No human should have such influence over her. Kai shook his head. "No trick," he said. "I have not met her before." "I promise, she just knows me somehow." The Queen's advisors whispered among themselves. Some suggested confinement, others urged caution, but the Queen did not act immediately. Instead, she gestured for Kai to follow her deeper into the palace. As he walked, he glanced back at Lyra, who waved at him shyly. He could feel the tension in the palace slowly building, not with hostility, but with curiosity and unease. Once inside the Queen's private chamber, Kai was left alone with the Queen and Lyra. The walls glimmered with a soft golden light, and the air smelled faintly of flowers native to Zephora Prime. Lyra approached the Queen and whispered something that Kai could not understand. The Queen listened carefully, then looked at Kai with a new intensity. "Humans," she said slowly, "are not supposed to understand Zalari emotions. They are too chaotic. Yet you have reached my daughter's heart. This is unprecedented." Kai nodded, unsure what else to say. He had been trained to navigate alien cultures carefully, but nothing in his education had prepared him for a scenario like this. "I don't know how," he admitted. "I only know that she seems happy to see me, and I feel the same way, though I don't understand why." Lyra tugged gently at his sleeve, and for a moment all tension in the room vanished. She smiled brightly, her eyes sparkling. Kai realized then that the bond was real and mutual, even if he could not explain it scientifically. It was something deeper, something instinctual, emotional, and powerful. The Queen studied them in silence. Finally, she spoke again, her voice firmer now. "We will observe this connection. Perhaps it is a gift, perhaps it is a warning, but one thing is clear. Your presence here will change more than just my daughter's life."
You have entered a world of politics, power, and tradition, and humans are not always welcome here.
"You must tread carefully." Kai nodded, swallowing hard. He understood that his simple act of curiosity and kindness had triggered something far larger than himself. He had crossed a line into a world where every action could ripple through generations of Zalari society. Yet, even as fear gripped him, a spark of excitement ignited. He realized that he was part of something extraordinary, a story that would be remembered not just on Zyphora Prime, but across the stars. Outside the chamber, the palace remained silent. Guards whispered, courtiers speculated, and the queen's advisors debated. The entire court had witnessed a moment that no one could explain. And the palace had, for the first time in generations, paused to consider a human not as a curiosity, but as something remarkable. Kai took a deep breath and looked at Lyra, who smiled up at him. For the first time in his life, he felt a bond that transcended language, species, and logic. It was a moment of true connection, and he knew, deep in his heart, that this was only the beginning. The entire palace had gone silent, but within that silence was the promise of something extraordinary, a human story about courage, empathy, and connection that would challenge even the most rigid traditions of the Zalari Empire. Kai had no idea how far it would go, but he was ready to face it. Kai could not shake the feeling of being under a microscope. Every moment in the palace brought new challenges. He had survived the shock of being hugged by Princess Lyra, but now he faced questions he could not answer. The Zalari Queen had ordered him to remain in her observation chambers, under the careful watch of her most trusted advisors. They asked questions not only about humans, but about himself, his habits, his history, his thoughts. Every answer he gave was analyzed, judged, and recorded. Yet Kai realized that while he was being tested, he was also learning more than he ever had about the Zalari. Lyra was a constant presence. She was allowed to visit him frequently, under the Queen's cautious approval. During these visits, she spoke little, but her gestures, expressions, and laughter conveyed more than words ever could. Kai began to notice a pattern in her behavior. Whenever he explained something about Earth, human culture, or simple science experiments, her eyes sparkled, as if she were absorbing every detail with an intensity that surprised even her own people. It was during one of these quiet afternoons that Lyra revealed something extraordinary. She led Kai to a secluded balcony overlooking the palace gardens. Strange alien plants shimmered with bioluminescence, casting soft blue and green lights across the marble floor. Lyra touched one of the glowing vines gently and whispered a word in Zalari. The vine responded, curling toward her hand as if alive. Kai could see that this was no ordinary communication. It was empathy that extended beyond her species, a connection that could sense and respond to emotions. "I can feel things," Lyra said softly, turning to him. "I can feel how others think, and sometimes how they wish things were. It is why I hugged you, because I knew you would understand me." Kai stared at her, astonished. He had expected alien biology, alien technology, but not this. It explained her behavior, but it also explained why the court had reacted so strongly. Both. If a Zalari child could bond with a human so instinctively, it broke centuries of protocol. You sensed me?" Kai asked, struggling to find words. "But we've never met. How is that even possible?" Lyra smiled. "It is rare, even among Zalari. We are taught to hide it. But I could not. You are different." Kai felt a rush of both wonder and responsibility. He realized that his presence in the palace was no accident. His humanity, his empathy, his curiosity, his ability to connect, was being tested and observed. And yet he could not shake the feeling that there was more at stake than just understanding a child's unusual abilities. Days passed, and the palace slowly returned to its routine, though whispers never ceased. Kai observed that some courtiers avoided him entirely, while others tried to study him as if he were an experiment. Lyra, however, remained his guide in this foreign world. She took him to secret libraries, hidden observation chambers, and ancient archives that chronicled the Zalari history. Through these excursions, Kai discovered the secrets the Zalari had tried to hide. Their empire, while magnificent and disciplined, was fragile in unexpected ways. They relied heavily on hierarchy, tradition, and strict obedience. Innovation was limited, and while they were physically powerful, their minds were often slow to adapt. It was clear that if a threat arose, an invasion, a rebellion, or a disaster, they would struggle to respond quickly. Humans, by contrast, thrived in unpredictability. Kai felt a quiet confidence building within him. Perhaps, despite being an outsider, he could make a difference. His chance came sooner than he expected. One evening, while observing the sunset over Xiphora Prime's twin suns, the palace alarms suddenly blared. Kai rushed to the balcony as Lyra grabbed his hand. From their vantage point, he could see ships approaching the palace, sleek, dark vessels not belonging to any faction the Zalari had mentioned. "The Druxari," Lyra whispered. "They are our rivals. They will strike while we are unprepared." Kai's heart raced. Humans rarely saw battles from space firsthand, but he knew enough from history and simulations to understand the gravity of the situation. The Zalari court, paralyzed by centuries of tradition, would be slow to act. Kai turned to Lyra. "We need to do something. Now, we can't wait for orders. They will come too late." Lyra nodded, her hand squeezing his. "I trust you." Together, they ran to the Queen's command chamber, where advisors were arguing over protocol. The Queen once again radiated authority, but even she looked concerned. The enemy fleet was large, and the palace defenses were sophisticated but designed for controlled assaults, not surprise attacks. Kai stepped forward, trying to remain calm. "Your defenses are strong," he said, "but they rely on predictability. The enemy will expect your response to follow routine. Humans, we are unpredictable." "I can help you fight differently," the advisors scoffed, murmuring about the arrogance of a human daring to lecture them. But the Queen did not dismiss him. Instead, she studied him carefully. "Speak, human. What is your plan?" Kai took a deep breath. "We use what humans call improvisation. We create distractions, fake weaknesses, and force them to make mistakes. Your soldiers are excellent, but they are trained to follow orders, not to think outside the plan. I can guide some of your forces, humans and willing Zalari, through actions they do not expect." The room fell silent. The idea of a human commanding Zalari forces, even partially, was almost unthinkable. But Lyra stepped forward. "We can do it," she said. "I will help, and others will follow me." The Queen hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Very well. You will lead, human, but remember, one mistake, and it is not only your life that is lost. You will risk the lives of the palace and my daughter." Kai's stomach tightened, but he nodded. He was no soldier, but he knew that humans excelled in improvisation and courage under pressure. He had faced dangerous situations before, but nothing like this. He realized that this moment would test everything about him: intelligence, empathy, bravery, and adaptability. Over the next hours, Kai worked tirelessly, organizing a small force composed of humans and Zalari youths willing to take risks. He trained them in strategies that combined deception, quick decision-making, and emotional cues, tactics the Zalari had never considered. They created false signals, set traps in the palace corridors, and prepared to mislead the enemy fleet. As night fell, the Druxari ships approached the outer defenses. The palace shimmered under the twin moons, but inside, the tension was unbearable. Kai, standing beside Lyra and a small group of young Zalari, felt a mixture of fear and determination. He realized that humans, despite being physically weaker than many alien species, had strengths the Zalari had overlooked: intuition, empathy, and the ability to adapt in chaos. When the first enemy fighters struck, chaos erupted. Zalari soldiers responded as expected, following strict protocol. But the human-led group moved unpredictably, sabotaging the enemy and creating openings the Zalari had never imagined. Kai's strategies worked. Not perfectly, but enough to shift the battle in their favor. From the Queen's balcony, she watched in astonishment as humans and Zalari youths executed complex maneuvers that no formal training could have achieved. The courtiers whispered in disbelief. The child who had hugged the human was now leading her people to survive a sudden assault. During a critical moment, Kai saw a Drazari fighter heading straight for Lyra. Without hesitation, he dived into the path, pushing her out of the way and taking the brunt of the attack himself. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and for a moment, everything seemed lost, but the plan held. The enemy, confused by unexpected resistance and unpredictable tactics, began to retreat. Lyra ran to Kai immediately after, grabbing his arm and holding him close. "You are safe," she said, her voice trembling. "I knew you could do it." Kai smiled despite his exhaustion. "We did it together," he said. Humans and Zalari, side by side. The Queen descended to the battlefield afterward, her presence commanding immediate attention. She looked at Kai with a mixture of respect and wonder. "You have shown us something humans possess that we have overlooked for centuries," she said. "Courage, intuition, and the ability to act without fear. You have changed the outcome of this day, and perhaps the future of our empire." Kai realized then that he had stepped into a story far larger than he could have imagined. A simple assignment had turned into a defining moment for both humans and Zalari. And as he looked at Lyra, who smiled proudly beside him, he knew that their bond, started with a simple hug, had become a symbol of trust, cooperation, and the unexpected power of humanity. Kai had expected the chaos of the Draxari attack to be the height of his challenges on Zyphora Prime, but he quickly realized he was only at the beginning. The victory had brought relief to the palace, but it had also sent ripples across the Zalari Empire. Courtiers whispered that humans could influence their children, their strategies, and even the Queen herself. Many saw Kai as a threat. Some saw him as a savior. Lyra stayed close to him. She had become not only his guide, but his ally. She understood the ways of the palace better than anyone, and she had a boldness unusual for a Zalari child. "They trust you," she said one morning, her voice low but serious. "And they fear you at the same time. That is a dangerous combination."
Kai nodded, aware that her words were true.
His human qualities, curiosity, empathy, adaptability, had earned him respect, but they also caused suspicion. Humans had a way of doing the unexpected, acting in ways the Ixalari had never trained for. The Queen had allowed him influence over the palace's younger forces, but some of the elder courtiers had begun plotting behind closed doors, wondering how to reclaim control. It was during one of these quiet days that the real challenge arrived. Scouts reported unusual activity in the outer sectors of Zyphora Prime. Strange ships, unlike the Draxari, were appearing near key colonies. Intelligence suggested a coalition of alien factions had gathered, hoping to take advantage of the Zalari Empire's perceived weakness. If they succeeded, the palace would fall and the Queen could lose her power. Kai understood immediately that this was bigger than any battle he had fought before. The palace defenses alone would not be enough. The Zalari had always relied on strength and protocol, but protocol could be predicted. Kai had to come up with a plan that used human ingenuity and unpredictability on a massive scale. He called a meeting with Lyra and a few trusted Zalari youths. Using a holographic table, he began explaining his plan. "We cannot fight them directly. They will overwhelm our forces if we follow normal tactics. We need to be unexpected, flexible, and smart. Humans thrive in chaos. They make the best decisions when plans fall apart. We will use that to our advantage." The youths listened carefully, some skeptical, some amazed. They had never seen a human lead, yet they could see the logic in his words. Lyra nodded firmly. "I trust you. Teach us. Show us how to do what our elders cannot." Kai divided them into small teams, each with a mix of humans and Zalari. He trained them in tactics that combined intelligence, improvisation, and observation. They learned to use the palace's architecture to their advantage, set traps, create decoys, and manipulate enemy movements. Kai emphasized something the Zalari rarely considered: predicting behavior through empathy. By understanding what the enemy expected, they could act differently, turning expectations against them. When the coalition finally struck, the palace was ready in ways the attackers never anticipated. From the first moments, Kai's teams moved unpredictably, sabotaging supply lines, cutting off communication channels, and leading smaller enemy groups into ambushes. The palace soldiers, initially hesitant, adapted quickly under Lyra's guidance. They began to trust in Kai's approach, witnessing firsthand that improvisation could achieve what rigid planning could not. Kai moved through the battlefield constantly, giving instructions, observing patterns, and reacting to changes. His human mind excelled in a way the Zalari had never expected. He could think several steps ahead while remaining flexible, adjusting the plan as new information appeared. The coalition, confident in their numerical superiority, was caught off guard by the unpredictable strategies. Enemy commanders expected rigid responses, but found none. Every time they tried to flank, they ran into traps. Every time they attempted to communicate or coordinate, Kai's teams intercepted or misled them. What should have been a straightforward conquest turned into a confusing, chaotic retreat for the enemy. Amid the fighting, a critical moment arrived. A group of enemy fighters attempted to infiltrate the palace directly, targeting the queen. Kai and Lyra noticed the maneuver immediately. Without hesitation, Kai ran to intercept, rallying the young Zalari with him. Using the palace's corridors and secret passages, they confronted the intruders in a way that leveraged speed, surprise, and intuition rather than sheer strength. Kai found himself in a narrow hallway, facing 3 heavily armed aliens. He could not overpower them, but he could outsmart them. Using reflections from the crystal walls and careful movement, he lured them into a trap. Lyra, standing nearby, helped guide their momentum, using her empathic abilities to anticipate their actions. Within moments, the intruders were disarmed and captured, confused by the unorthodox human-led tactics. Word of Kai's actions spread quickly through the palace. Courtiers who had doubted him now watched with a mixture of awe and fear. The queen herself observed silently, her sharp eyes never leaving him. She had trained generations of Zalari in discipline, strategy, and control, yet a human child of another species was teaching them lessons they had never learned. When the battle ended, the coalition forces retreated, defeated not by numbers but by creativity, adaptability, and courage. Kai's human strategies had turned what could have been disaster into victory. The palace erupted in celebration, but the atmosphere was not just of triumph. It was also of realization. The Zalari had underestimated humans, and now their perception had changed forever. Kai, exhausted but exhilarated, stood beside Lyra in the palace courtyard. The young princess looked at him with pride and admiration. "You taught us what we could not see before," she said softly. "You showed us that sometimes courage and quick thinking matter more than strength and order." Kai smiled, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. "We did it together," he said. Humans and Zalari. We adapted, we improvised, and we protected the palace. That is what matters." The queen approached them afterward. For the first time, her expression softened in public. "Humans possess a unique kind of strength," she said, addressing both Kai and the court. "They are not like us. They do not follow our rules, and yet they achieve what we could not. Today, we have learned a lesson we cannot ignore. Kai, you have earned not only my respect, but the respect of the Zalari Empire." Kai felt a mixture of pride and humility. He had never sought power or recognition. His purpose had always been to learn, observe, and protect. Yet in this alien world, his humanity, the very qualities that made him different, had become a force that could influence an empire. In the days that followed, Kai continued to work with Lyra and the young Zalari. They explored new ways of integrating human and Zalari strengths, combining innovation with tradition, empathy with strategy. The palace, once rigid and silent, began to hum with energy as humans and Zalari learned from one another. Kai realized that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, full of threats and challenges, but humans had something unique, the ability to adapt, to empathize, and to act with courage in the face of uncertainty. These qualities had already changed Sci-Fi Prime, and he suspected they could change much more. One evening, as the twin suns set over the palace towers, Lyra approached Kai again. She hugged him, a gesture of gratitude and trust. "You are not like any human I imagined," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "You are extraordinary." Kai laughed softly, feeling the warmth of her words. "I am just a human," he said. "But humans, we have a way of surprising even the strongest civilizations." The queen, watching from her balcony, observed the exchange silently. She knew that this human had done more than defend her palace. He had changed the way her people would think about the universe, about other species, and about the potential of humans. In that moment, the seeds of a new era were planted. One where humans were no longer outsiders, but valued allies, capable of guiding, teaching, and inspiring even the most advanced civilizations. Kai looked out at the stars, knowing that challenges would come again. The galaxy was unpredictable, dangerous, and full of wonders he had yet to understand. But he also knew that humans, curious, brave, and adaptable, could meet those challenges in ways no one else could. And with Lyra and the Zalari at his side, he felt ready for anything. The palace, once silent in fear and doubt, now resonated with hope, trust, and the unshakable proof that humanity, even on a distant world, could leave a mark that no empire could ignore. Kai had never felt more at home in a place that was not his own. The palace, once cold and distant, now seemed alive with possibility. Zalari children trained by him moved confidently through the halls, blending human ingenuity with their own disciplined skills. The queen herself had begun consulting him regularly, asking questions about human methods, strategy, and even philosophy. Kai realized that the small human spark he had brought to Sci-Fi Prime had ignited a change that would ripple through the Empire for generations. But Kai knew better than to think the galaxy would remain peaceful. Even after the Draxari defeat and the retreat of other rival factions, intelligence reports indicated that threats continued to gather on the outskirts of Zalari space. The Queen's empire, though powerful, had vulnerabilities Kai had already begun to exploit. The Zalari relied on rigid hierarchy, predictable defenses, and strict obedience. Humans thrived in chaos, improvisation, and emotional intelligence. Kai understood that his presence here was no accident. Humanity had a role to play, one that the Zalari were only beginning to comprehend. Lyra stayed by his side constantly. Her bond with Kai had grown stronger after every shared battle, every strategy session, every quiet moment in the palace gardens. She was no longer just the curious child who had hugged him on the first day. She had become a trusted ally, a student, and in her way, a teacher. She had begun guiding young Zalari and human-inspired tactics, showing them how to combine creativity with their disciplined training. One evening, the Queen summoned Kai to the Royal Council chamber. The room was filled with courtiers, generals, and Zalari scholars. Everyone turned to Kai as he entered. The Queen's voice was calm, but carried the weight of authority. "Kai, human, you have done more than survive in our palace. You have defended it, educated our children, and challenged our thinking. The Empire owes you a debt, but more than that, you have earned respect. I ask you now, what will you do with it?" Kai felt a surge of responsibility. He knew this was a pivotal moment, not just for him, but for humanity and for the Zalari. He had seen firsthand that humans, though physically weaker than many species, could accomplish extraordinary feats when they relied on their courage, creativity, and empathy. He took a deep breath. "I do not seek power or recognition," he said. "I want to ensure that humans and Zolari can work together, that we can learn from one another and face the galaxy's challenges side by side." A murmur of approval spread through the chamber. Some courtiers still whispered skeptically, but even they could not deny the logic and the results of Kai's guidance. The Queen nodded. "Very well. Then humanity shall have a place in this empire, guided by your example. Let this be the beginning of a new era." Kai smiled, humbled yet determined. "I will do my best," he said, "and I will continue to teach what humans can offer: adaptability, courage, and empathy, so that we all grow stronger together." In the following weeks, the palace began to change even further. Kai led sessions with young Zolari, teaching them not only strategy but the human approach to thinking outside the rules, improvising, and responding to unpredictable events. Lyra was always at his side, learning quickly, and often surprising Kai with ideas he had not considered. Together they created programs to train future leaders who could combine the best traits of both species. News of Kai's accomplishments spread beyond the palace. Other species in the galaxy, once indifferent to humans, began to take notice. Diplomatic envoys sought him out, curious about how a single human had influenced one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. Even the Draxari, defeated but not destroyed, began to treat humans with caution, knowing that humans could not be predicted. One day, while walking through the palace gardens, Kai and Lyra discovered a secluded courtyard filled with plants that responded to emotions. Lyra laughed, touching the vines lightly, which shimmered and curled in response. "I wish humans had a garden like this on Earth," she said, "where emotions could grow and shape the world." Kai chuckled. "Maybe we do, in a way." Humans grow their strength, empathy, and creativity every day. It is invisible, but it shapes everything we do. Lyra looked at him, her eyes shining. "You have shown us that strength is not just in weapons or rules. It is in understanding, caring, and being brave when it matters most. That is why the palace once went silent when I hugged you, and that is why the Empire listens now." Kai nodded, understanding her words deeply. That first hug had been the start of everything, not just a gesture of friendship, but a bridge between species, a spark that ignited change. As months passed, Kai continued to train, guide, and advise. The Zolari, once rigid and unyielding, began to embrace flexibility and innovation. They combined their incredible discipline with human creativity, becoming a force stronger than they had ever imagined. Humans were still rare on Zyphora Prime, but their influence, guided by Kai, was undeniable. Then came the ceremonial day, when the Queen formally recognized Kai before the entire court. The halls were packed with dignitaries, soldiers, and scholars. Lyra stood beside him, holding his hand firmly, her face radiant with pride. The Queen stepped forward, her expression serene but commanding. "Kai, human," she began, her voice echoing through the hall. "You have defended this palace, guided our people, and shown the galaxy the true power of humanity. Your courage, empathy, and ingenuity have proven that humans are not to be underestimated. Today I honor you, not as a guest or outsider, but as an ally and a teacher. Let your name be remembered in the history of the Zelari Empire." The court erupted in applause, some hesitant at first, but growing louder as the significance of the moment sank in. Kai felt a mixture of humility and pride. He had never sought fame or recognition, but standing there, he understood the true meaning of his journey. Humans had proven themselves capable, not through brute strength, but through qualities that could change the fate of worlds: courage, empathy, and adaptability. Lyra hugged him tightly again, as she had done the very first day he arrived. This time, however, there was no confusion, only joy and recognition. "We did it together," she whispered. Kai smiled. Yes, together. That night, as he walked through the palace corridors alone, Kai reflected on the journey. From a human xenobiologist unsure of his place in the galaxy, he had become a symbol of human potential, a bridge between species, and a teacher of qualities the Xelari had long ignored. The palace, once silent in fear and tradition, now thrummed with energy, hope, and possibility. He knew the galaxy would continue to be dangerous. Rival factions still existed, and new threats would inevitably rise. But Kai also knew that humans, with their courage, intelligence, and ability to adapt to the unexpected, would always find a way to thrive. And with allies like Lyra and the Xelari, humans could not only survive, they could shape the future of entire civilizations. As the twin suns rose over Xiphora Prime the next morning, Kai looked out from the palace balcony. Below, the courtyard was alive with children laughing, soldiers training, and courtiers discussing ideas openly. He could see that the empire itself was changing, slowly embracing qualities that humans had always taken for granted: creativity, empathy, and courage. Lyra ran to him again, laughing, and they both watched as the first Xelari youth trained under Kai's guidance performed an improvisational maneuver that would have shocked the elders just months before. "They are learning fast," Kai said. Lyra nodded. "They are learning from the best," she said with a smile, her eyes bright. "From you." Kai placed his hand on her shoulder. "We are learning from each other," he said. "Humans and Xelari. Together, we can face anything." And in that moment, Kai realized something profound. The galaxy was not just a place of conflict, mystery, and danger. It was a place of connection, courage, and opportunity. Humans had always survived against odds, adapted to challenges, and inspired change. On Xiphora Prime, they had done all of that, and more. The palace, once silent when the alien princess had hugged him, now resonated with life, laughter, and hope. Humans had left their mark, not through force or domination, but through the very qualities that made them human. Kai smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning of a story that would echo through the stars for generations to come. And somewhere deep in the palace, the queen watched silently, a small, rare smile on her face. She had witnessed a human teach her people, inspire her daughter, and prove that courage and intelligence could surpass even the most advanced traditions. Kai had changed Xiphora Prime forever, and in doing so, had shown that humanity could leave its mark anywhere in the galaxy.